Hidden within the wilderness of Pennsylvania stands one of the most interesting parks we've ever been to. A unique blend of a theme park, a museum, a sideshow alley, a rural village, and a public pool. The variety at Knoebels is unmatched by almost any other theme park in the world. If you can think of a ride type, it's probably a Knoebels. Don't let this convince you though that Knoebels is merely a jack of all trades, because hidden within this park are some of the best and most unique attractions in the world, alongside some others that are just plain weird. With over 55 attractions, this family-owned operation is America's largest free admission amusement park, opening almost a century ago, back in 1926. And yep, you heard that right, free admission. So without a ticket check, let's stumble straight into this park and discover what makes Knoebels one of the most unique, different, and refreshing theme parks we've ever been to. Thrill rides, 7 out of 10. For a park that by Australian standards is in the middle of nowhere, Knoebels has a surprisingly strong thrill lineup, with several iconic roller coasters and a multitude of flat rides. From the footage you've seen so far, you can likely make out that Knoebels has a rather rustic style, which of course means that the park has several wooden roller coasters, with one of them possibly being the best in the world. But we'll get onto that in a second, because firstly, let's touch on the roller coaster that put this park on the map for us in the first place. A one-of-a-kind wooden roller coaster that is a throwback to a time gone by. Flying Turns. Modeled after a similar design from the 1920s, Flying Turns were an early type of bobsled coaster made entirely of wood that existed originally throughout the 1900s, but were all defunct by the 1970s. Despite this, Knoebels staff were committed to bringing back the design and built the coaster pretty much completely from scratch. It's an incredible feat to see roller coaster history preserved in an operational attraction that I feel could only exist somewhere like Knoebels. As mentioned before, the feeling of the attraction is very similar to modern-day bobsled coasters such as Reptilian at King's Dominion, but the train tends to glide around the track in a less predictable manner, which leads to an interesting feeling of haphazardness. Is it the best roller coaster in the world? No. Is it worth coming to Knoebels purely for this ride to experience theme park history though? Absolutely. Another iconic roller coaster made out of wood is Phoenix. Now, I'm not 100% sure how to explain this, but Phoenix might be the wildest ride we've ever been on. Not knowing much about the park, we really didn't expect anything from this coaster going in. It's not that big of a ride, and when you take your seat, you're only held in by a lap bar that barely touches you. This lulls you into a false sense of security, as what we expected next was an unrelenting airtime machine. Hauling around the track, your bum barely touches the seat, as it genuinely feels like you're about to be thrown out of the train. At points, we were genuinely standing up in our seats, and frankly, we couldn't get enough of it, riding it countless times thanks to its short wait time. It's no surprise that Phoenix is widely regarded as the best wooden roller coaster in the world. The final wooden coaster in the park is Twister. Unfortunately, experiencing Phoenix first put this ride at a severe disadvantage, as whilst it's a brilliant wooden roller coaster, it pales in comparison to Phoenix, but it is still worth a ride. Towards the park's entrance is Impulse, Knoebels' big steel roller coaster. A relatively new addition to the park that doesn't quite live up to the uniqueness of the wooden offerings available throughout Knoebels, and its addition does feel somewhat out of place. But we also understand that having a steel roller coaster like this is essentially ticking a box for potential visitors, and it maintained a healthy queue throughout the day. Now, Knoebels has no shortage of thrilling flat rides throughout the park, with a mixture of modern staples such as spinning pendulums and a power surge, alongside classics that you'd struggle to find elsewhere. And even this flyer, which was, no joke, powered by a tractor engine, which might just be one of the most rural American theme park things we've ever seen. Many of these flats were a bit too spinny for our liking, but will likely be loved by any thrill-seeking teenagers in your group. But there is one more coaster to talk about. Black Diamond is an absolutely bizarre roller coaster that is impossible to explain without experiencing it yourself. It's not quite a dark ride, not quite a coaster, but somehow both. Touted as an eerie trip through the mines of Pennsylvania, I have a lot of respect for these weird and bizarre types of rides, because every year they become fewer and farther between. But I do understand that others may leave this attraction just plain confused. Despite this being labelled as a roller coaster, it's tame enough that it can be experienced by the whole family. Which leads us to family rides, 7 out of 10. There is no shortage of rides at Knoebels, and just like its thrill lineup, the family attractions are a similar mixture of classic and modern staples. It's become kind of a joke in our scripting at this point because we mention it so often, but we have to say it here. Knoebels truly has something for everyone. Motorboats, vintage cars, trains, dodgems, a log flume, and a shoot the chutes are just some of what's on offer at the park. But taper your expectations slightly because this isn't Disneyland. You won't find any slow-moving or high-budget dark rides based around characters you know, and that's completely okay. Knoebels isn't trying to do that, but instead offers variety in its selection to ensure that everyone from toddlers to grandparents can have a good day out. Knoebels is also chock full of transportation attractions that ultimately just go in circles. But trust us, we aren't complaining. The train provides an excuse to just sit down and enjoy some of the beautiful local wilderness, as well as the skyway that offers a magnificent bird's eye view of the park, which we in our cameras couldn't get enough of. This was also the first time we have had the opportunity to experience a classic ring-throwing carousel. These were a staple back in the day, but have slowly been phased out over the years. The general premise is to grab the ring and throw it in the hole. I've never been one to re-ride carousels, but this little gimmick had me going over and over again. Once I'd gotten past the initial fear that my hand was going to be torn off trying to grab the ring, I eventually got a feel for it, and it completely changed the average carousel experience. I honestly wish more theme parks had this still. Now, we may have told you a slight fib before when we said you won't find any slow-moving dark rides, because there is one. But we wouldn't recommend it for the younger ones. Haunted Mansion is one of the few attractions that requires an additional payment on top of having a ride-all-day pass. Based on classic ghost trains, it's full of interesting effects and strange oddities that exude charm. It's a bit more intense though than a certain other spooky house that shares the same name, so it might be worth leaving the little ones behind on this one, but we do recommend checking it out. Also, I was violently angry after being blasted by a certain truck horn during the ride, and if you've ridden this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We could spend all day just talking about the sheer amount of family rides this park has, but we don't have time for that, because it's time for experiences, 8 out of 10. As mentioned earlier, Knoebels is as much of a museum as it is a theme park, with countless rides and attractions that take you back to the golden era of amusement parks. The park also has a number of actual museums though, with the first being the Carousel Museum. I genuinely think we may have been the only people who went into this building on the day we visited, but it was definitely worth it. This tiny, cramped building contains over 50 carousel figures, scenery paintings, and other carousel memorabilia, with some pieces being over 150 years old. The park also has a mining museum that wasn't insanely interesting to us, and a Knoebels history museum that was interesting to us, featuring old ride vehicles, an amazing timeline of the park, and plenty of historic photos. And the best thing is, all three of these museums are completely free to enter. At one point in our day, we stumbled into the park's fascination parlor, and the look of bewilderment on our faces caught the attention of the workers there, who gave us a few tokens to play a few rounds of this classic amusement game. Rolling the balls down the playfield, we truly felt as if we had stepped back in time, which is exactly what this park does best. Knoebels also features a large swimming pool with slides that were busier than the rides when we visited. While Knoebels may not have grand experiences like Poseidon's Fury at Islands of Adventure, and in fairness, now neither does Islands of Adventure, the fact that all of this is completely free to experience and explore makes it extra special and well worth considering. Entertainment, 5 out of 10. Entertainment on your visit will be highly dependent on the day and time of year. On our visit, we caught 2 shows in the park's main entertainment location called the Bandshell. First was the Avalons, a Beach Boys-esque show that played music well out of our era, but a show we still enjoyed, even if it was mostly as it gave us a place just to chill out and relax. Second was the Davison Family Circus, which was a mix of juggling, quick change, and magic, none of which was roof-raisingly amazing, but also weren't offensively bad, unlike some other shows we saw on our US road trip. Elsewhere around the park were 2 other shows, including a lighthouse puppet show and something called the Time Machine Theater that we missed out on. While none of the shows were groundbreaking, the fact that anyone can come into the park for free and watch them was a nice little surprise. The park is also full of historic pipe organs, with our favorite being a classic, almost 120-year-old Wurlitzer across from Phoenix that we could happily listen to all day. These may not be entertainment for most, but for us, they certainly are. Operations, 6 out of 10. Pay-per-ride parks usually have top-notch operations, as more guests through each ride per hour directly equals more money to the park, though this wasn't always the case at Knoebels. Some rides were randomly closed, and when we'd ask people, they told us they'd be closed all day, only for us to walk by later and find the ride open for business. Flying Turns has short trains that only hold 3 to 6 people each, and all of those people have to be weighed before riding. The park did make the best of this situation though, with the ride running multiple trains, but just beware that due to the nature of this attraction, you can probably expect to have one of, if not the longest wait in the park here. Speaking of long waits, there didn't appear to be much consistency in regards to operations. Despite it being a very quiet day, some rides still had long waits for no apparent reason. We felt that operations weren't super transparent. We went to Twister and there was no signage or any operators in sight. Visiting a nearby ticket booth, they said that the ride was closed and didn't have much more information to give us. Later on, the ride reopened, but at the same time, Phoenix then closed. This may have been a staffing problem, but with little consistency or advertising, it was just hard to figure out. And it's not a great feeling to trudge all the way over to a ride just to find it closed with no notice. But you know what would help our operations here at ReviewTyme? Giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. And if you want to further support what we do, be sure to check out our Patreon. Theming, 4 out of 10. Knoebels isn't a true theme park, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. The park knows exactly what it is and embraces that small town amusement park feel well. Despite this, the architectural style in the park stays pretty consistent throughout, with a kind of rural lodge theme. The park is well looked after and filled with lush greenery that makes exploring it enjoyable, as there's always something new and exciting just around the corner. Some attractions, such as Black Diamond and the Haunted Mansion, are well themed individually, but there isn't really an overarching theme to tie them together with anything else around. Merchandise, 5 out of 10. For a small park in the middle of nowhere, we were surprised at the number of park-specific merchandise offerings. The largest available range of items was the t-shirts, with a huge variety of designs, all at a reasonable price. Not just featuring the park, but also plenty of options featuring individual attractions. You can also find the park's logo on keychains, mugs, and pretty much any other expected classic theme park choice, all for reasonable prices. Outside of these, there's a ton of random stuff that wouldn't feel out of place in a thrift or dollar store, which was a bit weird to see. Not that we're complaining, as kids seem to love it, it's just something to be aware of. Affordability, 10 out of 10. Knoebels is one of the few theme parks in the world that still runs on a free entry and pay-per-ride basis. If you're taking your kids into the park and don't want to ride anything, it won't cost you a cent. Even parking here is free, and they allow you to bring in any food that you want, meaning you can genuinely enjoy a day in this park for nothing, letting your kids ride the rides while you enjoy the entertainment, museums, and more. On weekdays, the park offers all-you-can-ride wristbands for $55, but most people won't need that anyway. With individual attractions ranging from $2 to $5, it's more economical for most people to just grab tickets and ride what they want to. Even if you decide to splurge and purchase food within the park, your wallet won't be hurting, as food is also extremely affordable. Dom got this massive pickle on a stick for just $1.50. Now compare that to a Disneyland pickle, which is $4 for the exact same thing. Of the 12 parks we visited on our USA road trip, Knoebels was easily the most affordable. Atmosphere, 6 out of 10. Knoebels is much like the camping of theme parks. It's slower paced, surrounded by wilderness and lush foliage in a rustic environment that feels cozy and welcoming. It's one of those parks that benefits greatly from its surrounding area and doesn't work against its natural setting, but rather embraces it. Despite visiting on a rather hot day, the abundance of trees surrounding and throughout Knoebels provided some excellent natural shade to help us escape from the heat. In saying that, after visiting around 8 gated theme parks before this, it's a strange feeling to walk into a park with no ticket check, no fanfare, and no grand entrance. The park just kind of begins. Having a gate does provide a unique feeling of exclusivity that drives you to stay as long as possible to maximize that ticket price. And whilst not having that same feeling does provide for a different experience, the lack of pressure is very welcoming. It was also evident when visiting that probably not too many Australians make their way to Knoebels, because for some guests and employees, we became somewhat of a novelty, with shocked looks when they heard our accents. Dom had an interesting experience where somebody at a store serving him just kind of stopped with their jaw agape when he tried to order something, which was rather funny for everyone involved. It does feel like this park was built for locals, and that's completely okay. Likewise, there's a true family feeling at Knoebels, with groups having 3 or 4 generations of family members all in the park together, and all having a great time. Services, 5 out of 10. Knoebels was open from 12 PM to 8 PM, which isn't insanely long hours compared to some other theme parks, but gave us a nice late start to the day, and we were easily able to get everything we wanted to do done by around 6 PM, so that we could get back on the road before it got too dark. Knoebels has a nearby campground and cottages that you can stay at, and the fact that you can come and go as you please without needing to pay for entry means that the park is full of similar campground amenities you may not find at other parks. Also, the addition of the large pool area does make Knoebels feel more like a village with rides than a theme park. For those with a permanent or physical mental disability, Knoebels provides a ride accessibility program which you can find more about on their website. Likewise, the park has partnered with the International Board of Credentialing and Continuing Education Standards to be a certified autism centre. This means their team has received specialised training to cater to all children, including those with special needs. Knoebels was the most remote park in our US road trip, but one we don't regret going out of our way for. But it's a hard park to wholly recommend to people who aren't as big of theme park nerds as us or are already in the area. Though if you ever make it out to Hershey Park, it's probably worth the hour and a bit drive north just to hit up Phoenix and Flying Turns alone. And the rest of the park is just a nice added bonus. We will probably never make it back to this park, but we were incredibly grateful we got to go this once. But over to you. Have you been lucky enough to make it out to Knoebels? And if so, what did you think? Let us know in the comments section down below. For ReviewTyme, I'm Luke. Thanks for watching.